Even Archie wished this case had stayed buried. Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Comment your city. I love hearing them. Wolfe solves what Archie couldn't stomach. I don't usually hate a case at the beginning. I wait until it's in the middle and I'm knee-deep in people lying for reasons they can't remember. But this one announced itself with a tone that told me right away I was going to hate it. It started at 10:30 on a Thursday morning, which was already off schedule. Fritz was experimenting with a new saffron broth for lunch, and Wolfe was in the plant rooms upstairs communing with orchids. The phone rang. I took it naturally. "Mr. Goodwin," said a voice that could have belonged to a tired violin. Rich once, but stretched too long. "This is Miss Lyra Norring. I was told by a Mr. Parker that if I ever had trouble requiring absolute discretion, I should speak to Mr. Wolfe." She said absolute discretion, like a stage whisper, the kind used by people who are certain their secrets are important enough to deserve applause. I said, "Mr. Wolfe is selective about his troubles. What kind are yours?" "It concerns an intrusion," she said. "Something taken, or perhaps left." That was a new one. I'm used to people who've lost things. People who've found something unexpected are usually the ones you wish hadn't. She wanted an appointment today, if possible. I told her it depended on the orchids. She didn't understand, but most people don't. When Wolfe came down at 11 in his yellow silk house jacket and a mood like a suspended thunderstorm, I told him. "An intrusion?" he said. His eyebrows rose enough to register mild interest. "Something taken or left?" "Pooey. Ambiguity is the refuge of the intellectually lazy." She sounded rich, I said, or trained to sound like it. "Ah," he murmured, settling into the chair behind his desk. "That at least is a virtue." He reached for a bottle of beer, tilted it against the lip of his glass with surgeon's precision, and watched the foam rise. "You may tell her 3 o'clock." I was surprised enough to say, "You're taking the case before hearing it." "I'm not taking it," he said. "I am permitting her to speak. There is a difference, which your democratic instincts obscure." At 3 on the dot, Miss Lyra Norring arrived, alone, tall, and wearing a grey coat that probably cost as much as Fritz's monthly grocery budget. She carried a slim leather case and the sort of tension you usually see in stage magicians before the curtain rises. Wolfe didn't rise, of course. He nodded toward the red leather chair opposite his desk and let me handle the formalities. When I brought her water, she smiled at me in a way that said she knew the effect of it but wasn't planning to use it. Yet. "My uncle, Mr. Wolfe," she began, "passed away 6 weeks ago. A quiet man, private. His estate was small, and the executor, Mr. Holden, completed the inventory. Except..." She opened the case, took out a photograph, and laid it on Wolfe's blotter. "This appeared in the house last week, in his desk drawer. I know it wasn't there before." Wolfe leaned forward just enough to glance at it. A black and white photo. 4 people at a dinner table, 3 smiling, 1, Lyra herself, looking away. "The intruder left this?" Wolfe asked. "Yes," and the desk was locked. I took the picture and turned it over. No date, no inscription, just a faint scent of lavender. "And you want Mr. Wolfe to tell you who left it?" I said. She hesitated. "That, and why?" "Because 2 days later someone tried to enter the house again. Nothing taken, just doors unlatched, drawers slightly open, as if someone wanted me to notice." Wolfe's lids lowered. That look of reluctant curiosity crossed his face, the kind that meant the game had baited him despite himself. "You believe this intrusion relates to the photograph?" he said. "I do, and to my uncle's work. He kept records, private ones on certain clients. He was an advisor to men in politics, though unofficially." That made Wolfe's mouth tighten a shade. The words unofficial advisor are the garlic to his intellectual appetite. He said, "Miss Norring, I detest enigmas presented without evidence. Bring me facts, names, dates, correspondences, and the circumstances of discovery. Mr. Goodwin will assist you in compiling them." Lyra looked at me, unsure whether she was being dismissed or deputized. I nodded. Outside in the hall, she said softly, "He doesn't seem interested." "Oh, he's interested," I told her. "You just can't see it yet. But take my word for it, when Nero Wolfe decides to move, it's usually to crush something." What I didn't say was that I'd already started hating this one, because something about the look she gave that photograph, half fear, half recognition, didn't match the words she'd used. And when clients start editing their fear, it means trouble's already unpacked its bags. Fritz doesn't like company before lunch, unless it peels, chops, or peels and chops. When I brought Lyra into the kitchen to borrow the phone, she needed to call the executor before he went underground for the day. Fritz gave me a look that could have clarified consommé. I didn't blame him. The saffron broth was whispering from the stove, and he was in a trance, spoon poised like a conductor's baton. Lyra made the call in a low voice and used words like urgent and now. And when she hung up, she had a time, 4 o'clock, for us to meet the executor, Mr. Holden, at her uncle's house on 91st. We went back to the office. Wolfe, who had not moved so much as a finger joint, was regarding the photograph on his blotter as if it were an insect he had not yet classified. Lyra stayed on her feet. She was too keyed up to sit and too trained to fidget. "Miss Noring," Wolfe said, "you will answer precisely. The photograph depicts you and 3 others. Identify them." "Left to right," she said. "Mr. Victor Holden, the executor. Mrs. Lila Harrow, she runs a private philanthropic fund. My uncle's friend, and the 4th is Mr. Bennett Crane. He manages a political strategy consultancy. The dinner was at the Hartwell Club last December." "Who took the photograph?" "A club photographer. It was printed for the newsletter but never used." "How did you obtain a copy?" "I didn't," she said. "That's the point. It shouldn't be in my uncle's desk. I never saw a print." Wolfe grunted. "The lavender scent?" She let the smallest smile flicker. "Mrs. Harrow wears it, always. Phui, that odor is common currency. The desk. Who had keys?" "My uncle kept one. I have the other. Since his death, I've been in the house alone, except when Mr. Holden brought in an appraiser for the library." "Names, Miss Noring. The appraiser." "Clive Renner." Wolfe nodded toward me. I jotted the roster. Holden, Harrow, Crane, Renner. Names that wouldn't embarrass a telephone directory. "Your uncle's papers," Wolfe said. "You suggested they might contain material some would prefer to control. Did he confide details?" "Not details," she said. "He advised people on timing, favors, optics. He wasn't paid openly, but he never lacked for invitations. He had a habit of writing notes to himself. Not diaries, memos. Sharp, sometimes unkind. He destroyed most. He told me once that a kept note is a kept knife." "Wise," Wolfe murmured. "And yet someone believes a blade remains." She took a breath. "Yes." Wolfe picked up the photograph with 2 fingers and held it to the light, then set it down as if returning a surrendered weapon. "Mr. Goodwin and I will meet Mr. Holden at 4. You will accompany us. Until then, do not telephone any of the others. Do not visit the house alone. You will remain here." Her head tilted. "Here. This room is secure enough if Mr. Goodwin is present," he said, "and I will be present by proxy in him. Fritz will feed you. You will oblige me by being as uninteresting as possible." She glanced at me. "Is that a house rule?" "It's a hobby," I told her. "We try to keep the air free of complications until the orchids come down to dinner." She stayed. She watched me make calls. To Saul Panzer to keep the afternoon open, to Lon Cohen for a peep on Bennett Crane's consultancy and whether they'd been busy last December, and to the Hartwell Club to confirm the existence of a photographer, and whether the newsletter ever printed a December dinner spread featuring a woman looking away as if she'd heard a bad violinist in the kitchen. The Hartwell's receptionist said they had a photographer and they had a December newsletter. She couldn't say what was in it without permission. I thanked her and told her I'd call back with a name that rattled doors. Wolfe lifted an eyebrow. "Rattle quietly," he advised. At 3:30, Lyra asked if she could see the plant rooms. "No," Wolfe said, and that was that. He doesn't let visitors up there unless they can distinguish a phalaenopsis from a philistine. At 3:45, we put on coats. Lyra's grey number had the kind of cut that makes a hanger look like it's slouching. Wolfe gave me a look that said to take care of the client and the car and, if possible, the case. I told him I would do it in that order. We reached the East Side address with 5 minutes to spare. Old brownstone, good bones, dull face. The kind of place where secrets sit quietly because the drapes taught them how. Holden arrived at 4 on the nose. 50. Compact. Hair that had decided to retreat in orderly squares. He wore a banker's overcoat and an expression like a fresh eraser. Clean, but ready to abrade. "Miss Norring," he said, and kissed the air near her cheek. To me, "Goodwin, I've heard of you." The tone implied he considered that inevitable and unfortunate. Inside, the house smelled like lemon oil and absence. The furniture had given up making points. We went to the study where the desk lived. It was walnut, old and honest about it. Holden produced a key. Lyra produced her twin. The locks turned with a clockmaker's sigh. "Here," she said, and opened the top right drawer. Empty, except for a faint rectangle where a photograph had recently napped. She touched the space as if it might reform. "I left it exactly here this morning before I came to you." I looked at Holden. He raised his hands. "I haven't been here since Monday. Inventory's done." "Anyone else?" I asked. He spread fingers. "No one with permission." Permission was not the question. I checked the window, a sash with a decent latch. The edges showed a smudge of something dull, like the ghost of a gloved thumb that had been careful but not perfect. I noted it. Then I took a slow tour of the room. Books shelved by height rather than subject, a crime against thought. A cabinet of correspondence, locked. A Persian rug that had seen better feet. Everything whispered routine. "Miss Norring," I said, "when you found the photo last week, where exactly was it?" "In the same drawer, under a pad of stationery." "Who knew you found it?" She didn't answer immediately. Holden looked at her. She looked at the rug. "I called Victor," she said at last, "and I called Mrs. Harrow for advice. She told me not to make a fuss yet, to see whether anything else would surface." Holden bristled. I said, "Call the police. You chose Mr. Wolfe." "Which tells," I put in, "the first interesting truth of the day." We moved into the hall to give the room time to confess. It didn't. Holden cleared his throat. "Mr. Goodwin, what exactly is the theory? Someone leaves a photograph to say, what? That Miss Norring is observed? That her uncle held something? It's theatrics." "Sure," I said. "But the audience is specific. The 4 people in the picture. You, Mrs. Harrow, Mr. Crane, and Miss Norring. If you want to spook a group, you send a letter. If you want to spook one person while reminding the others you exist, you slip something into a private drawer." Holden frowned. "I am not spooked." "That's your loss," I told him. Before he could gnaw on that, a soft thump came from upstairs. Lyra stiffened. Holden said, too quick, "Old pipes." The house was not that old. I went first. The landing held a pair of chairs that had retired from being sat on. A door at the end was ajar by an inch that hadn't been there when we came in. I pushed it open, a bedroom, neat and cold. On the dresser, someone had opened and then carefully reclosed a jewelry box. So carefully the lid's alignment was half a hair off. The kind of half that announces itself to people who notice. I'm employed on the premise that I notice. From the window, the street looked ordinary. Trees, cars, and a man reading a newspaper in a parked sedan with the quiet absorption of a person who had finished the crossword an hour ago and stayed for the view. He didn't look up. I memorized the plate. Back downstairs, I told Holden to call a locksmith and have the window latches checked for signs of angelic visitation. He sniffed. If there are no valuables missing. Something is missing, Lyra said. We both turned. She was in the doorway of a small room I hadn't poked yet, her uncle's little parlor. She pointed to a narrow shelf. The spice jar. Holden blinked. Spice jar. My uncle kept one ridiculous jar, cumin from a client's trip, on that shelf as a joke. He said he liked the idea of keeping a kitchen smell in a room where no one ate. It's gone. I looked at Wolfe's invisible presence and felt his approval like a barometric twitch. The smallest trespass, the stupidest object, and yet the neatest signature. All right, I said. We go back to the brownstone. Miss Norring, you're with me. Mr. Holden, call your locksmith, then go home and practice being unsurprised. If anyone calls you about an old spice jar, develop a sense of humor just long enough to tell me. On the sidewalk, the sedan with the newspaper was gone. The air had that late afternoon sharpened edge that makes people hurry even when they have no place to be. I didn't hurry. I drove, thinking about cumin and lavender and a photograph that had decided to travel without a passport. By the time we reached 35th Street, I knew two things. Someone wanted Lyra to feel watched without knowing by whom. And Wolfe, who hated enigmas, had just been handed a puzzle in the exact shape of his appetite. He was, waiting in his chair, beer poured, gaze steady. Report, he said. I gave it to him straight, including the newspaper man and the absent spice. His eyes cooled, which for Wolfe is the same as most men's eyes, blazing. Cumin, he said. A vulgar perfume in a parlor. Good. Mr. Goodwin, call Mr. Saul Panzer and ask him to attend us here at 8. Miss Norring will provide me now with the precise words Mrs. Harrow used when advising inaction last week. Precision, please. We proceed. Lyra stood by the Globe bar like someone afraid of touching anything that might turn. Wolfe had instructed her to recall every word Mrs. Harrow had used when she'd suggested inaction, and she tried, carefully. She said it was likely a sentimental gesture, that my uncle's friends might be leaving mementos, reminders of him, and that if anything else happened, I should tell Victor first. Sentimental gestures, Wolfe repeated, his voice the slow grind of a millstone. Humanity's excuse for disorder. He shut his eyes halfway, which for him was the equivalent of rolling them. Mr. Goodwin, you perceive the import? Sure, I said. Someone wanted her to sit tight, and if she told Holden, he'd have time to clean or hide something. A tidy way of keeping her quiet until the right people had done the wrong things. Wolfe nodded once. Mrs. Harrow's suggestion was not innocent. Either she wished to conceal her own involvement, or she acted on another's direction. Both are intolerable. Lyra frowned. She's not. She can't be. She was one of Uncle's oldest friends. Old friends, Wolfe said, are the usual instruments of ruin. Enemies at least announce themselves. He turned to the photograph again. Mrs. Harrow, Mr. Holden, Mr. Crane, one of them or all of them knew your uncle's habits. One entered his house, placed the photograph, removed the spice jar, and arranged these violations to cultivate anxiety. It is psychological gardening, and you, Miss Norring, are the flower they intend to force into bloom. She looked pale enough to wilt. Why me? Because you are the inheritor, he said, of both his name and his knowledge. Your uncle's memoranda may have survived, and someone fears they are in your hands. I leaned against the wall. That still doesn't explain the cumin. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. No, and it is vexing. Cumin is aggressive, unsubtle, and its odor lingers. To place such a jar in a drawing room is deliberate provocation. To remove it, perhaps reclaiming a symbol or erasing a trace. We must wait for the fact that will bind the scent to the act. Saul Panzer arrived just before 8. I let him in and briefed him while Fritz cleared away the dinner plates. Veal in caper sauce, which Wolfe had consumed in full awareness that tension never justifies fasting. Saul, as usual, listened with the patience of a man whose pulse had been professionally trained to avoid excitement. So we've got a photo that wasn't supposed to exist, an executor who locks desks, a widow of philanthropy who whispers patience, and a political operator who probably lies for rent, Saul said. You want me to start with the house, the people, or the car? The car, Wolfe said from his chair, was a sedan in which a man read a newspaper for no reason. Find him. Ascertain who he is and who pays him. Begin at the house on 91st. Report when you have something substantial. Saul nodded once and left, the kind of exit that doesn't waste hinges. Lyra shifted in her chair. Mr. Wolfe, I can't stay here indefinitely. You will, Wolfe said, until I tell you otherwise. I require immediate access to your observations. Mr. Goodwin will secure accommodations nearby for the nights, but your days are mine. That sealed it. She tried to object, thought better of it, and folded her hands. At 9, Lon Cohen called back. Bennett Crane's firm handled a quiet advisory contract for a political action committee last fall, he said. They were rumored to have been feeding talking points to a senator's re-election bid. Nothing illegal, but messy. The committee folded in January. Want names? I'll take them, I said, jotting as he spoke. One of the names was Hartwell, which made me remember the club dinner. Another was Harrow. I thanked Lon and hung up. Wolfe, I said, Crane's consultancy and Mrs. Harrow's fund were both connected to a political outfit that went under right after the dinner in that photo. If Lyra's uncle advised any of them privately, he might have written something unflattering. That'd be motive enough for a little late-night burglary. Indeed, Wolfe murmured. But the cumin? Maybe just a calling card. He gave me a look that said my imagination was an untrained animal. No. Symbolic acts obey internal logic. The jar's removal was not whimsical. Mr. Panzer will find its echo. It was close to 11 when the phone rang again. I caught it on the first buzz, half expecting Saul's monotone. Instead, a woman's voice, low and urgent. Mr. Goodwin? You're representing Miss Norring? Depends who's asking. This is Mrs. Harrow. I shouldn't be calling, but I thought you should know. Victor Holden is not what he seems. Don't trust him. Good advice in general, I said. Any reason you're donating it? A pause. Because I think something's been taken from the estate that none of us were supposed to know existed. What kind of something? I don't know yet, but if I can find proof, I'll bring it to you tomorrow. Please, tell Miss Norring to stay out of the house, and tell Mr. Wolfe. She stopped. Tell him he's being watched. The line went dead before I could offer my thanks. I turned toward Wolfe. He was already looking at me, lids low, head slightly back, the way he looks when he's balancing possibilities like weights. Mrs. Harrow, he said. Timely. Convenient. Or scared, I said. She sounded like she'd just realized the floor was thinner than she thought. Fear and guilt are indistinguishable by telephone, Wolfe said. But this call confirms we have more than an amateur prank. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Miss Norring, tomorrow you will write an invitation to Mrs. Harrow, Mr. Holden, and Mr. Crane. A polite request to join us here at 4 in the afternoon for a discussion concerning your uncle's estate. Mr. Goodwin will deliver them personally. I wish to observe their reactions without the noise of telephones. Lyra nodded, her expression a mix of dread and relief. And if they refuse? Wolfe smiled faintly, which on him was practically thunder. Then they will have told me what I need to know. The clock in the hall struck 11. Fritz passed through, collecting empty glasses with the efficiency of a man who believes dishes have feelings. Lyra excused herself to rest in the guest room. I lingered by the desk. "You think the cumin's the key?" I asked. Wolfe sighed, eyes closing. The cumin, the photograph, the lavender, they are the same voice, speaking in different tongues. When we translate, the culprit will be revealed. I left him to his thoughts, which were better company than most people's conversation. Upstairs, the brownstone was quiet again, but the quiet felt conditional, as if it were waiting for someone to test it. I didn't sleep well, because somewhere out there was a jar of spice that had walked out of a dead man's room, and people who might kill to keep it from telling where it had been. The next morning came with the kind of November drizzle that can't decide whether it's trying to clean the city or drown it. Fritz made eggs with tarragon, which meant Wolfe was in a mood approaching optimism, though no one else would have called it that. I took my coffee black and watched the rain turn the street into a mirror that lied about everything it reflected. Wolfe didn't speak until his second cup. "Mr. Goodwin, you will deliver the invitations. Miss Naring will remain here under Mr. Panza's supervision. Inform each of the three that attendance is not optional." "Polite coercion. Got it," I said. "You want me to make any particular face while I hand them over?" "The one that suggests inevitability," he said, rising, if you can call it that, from his chair to reach for the orchid catalogue on the side table. For him, that was as far as mobility went before noon. I pocketed the envelopes and headed out. Saul was waiting in the hall, hat brim dripping. "Car's downstairs," he said. Guy in the sedan was a freelancer. Name's Denny Lowe. Does stakeouts for anyone with a checkbook. Yesterday he was paid cash. No name, no return, number. Describe the buyer. Tall, thin, overcoat with a velvet collar, English cut, expensive shoes, drove a black Bentley, no plates front or back. Holden money? Maybe. Or Crane's. Saul shrugged. He's thorough. Whoever it was knew how to stay invisible. "Keep shadowing the house," I told him. "If Lowe comes back, follow him." He nodded, and I took the sedan into the mist. My first stop was Bennett Crane's consultancy on Madison, 9th floor, walls the color of ambition and desks that looked leased by the hour. Crane himself came out from behind a glass partition wearing a navy suit and an expression meant to sell conviction wholesale. "Archie Goodwin, representing Mr. Nero Wolfe," I said. "Invitation for you." He took it with 2 fingers, read it, and laughed, a short, dry sound. "Wolfe, the detective who never leaves his chair? Why would I attend?" "Because refusing him is like refusing gravity. You can try, but you'll look silly doing it." He smiled with too many teeth. "I've heard of your methods, Goodwin. Colorful. I suppose I can spare an hour to satisfy curiosity. What's this about?" "Your photograph," I said, "and a jar of cumin." He blinked once. His mouth tightened, then stretched back into the smile like a rubber band returning to duty. "Of course. 4 o'clock, then." Holden's office was next, in a building with more marble than conscience. He met me at the reception desk, calm as always, and when I gave him the envelope, he didn't bother to open it. "Wolfe wishes to convene everyone," he asked. "That's the word." "I don't see the purpose." "That's the charm of it," I told him. "He doesn't ask for belief, only attendance." Holden looked at me for a long second. "Does Miss Naring know he's calling us all together?" "She wrote the invitations." His eyes flicked, calculating. "Then of course I'll be there." He turned away too quickly, as if hiding a decision already made. The last stop was Mrs. Harrow. Her townhouse on East 62nd was old money preserved in formaldehyde. Lace curtains, portraits of disapproving ancestors, and a butler who looked as though he'd been pressed from the same mold. He led me into a drawing room heavy with the smell of lavender. She appeared a moment later, tall and composed, wearing black as if mourning were a wardrobe choice. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "you came faster than I expected." "You called last night," I said, and left a few sentences unfinished. Her eyes darted toward the butler, who discreetly evaporated. "I was indiscreet to call. Victor Holden has ears everywhere. Please tell Mr. Wolfe I'll come at 4, but I can't stay long." "You might want to clear your calendar," I said. "He's not fond of people leaving in the middle of his deductions." Her mouth trembled, barely, and she turned away. "Then I'll bring what I can before it's too late." "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer, just reached for a small silver box on the mantel and pressed it into my hand. "Give this to Mr. Wolfe." It belonged to Lyra's uncle. "I found it in my coat pocket last week. I don't know who put it there." It was light, cool to the touch, and when I opened it later in the car, it wasn't silver. It was tin, coated with polish. Inside was a folded piece of parchment paper, faintly stained with something brownish red. And the smell hit me instantly. Cumin. I kept it sealed, drove straight back to the brownstone, and found Wolfe in his chair with a fresh bottle of beer open and Miss Norring pacing near the globe. "Report," he said. I placed the tin on the desk. "From Mrs. Harrow. She claims she found it in her pocket. It smells like our missing spice." Wolfe opened it, inhaled once, then shut it again. "Not merely cumin, mixed with something, perhaps iron oxide. You recognize it? Rust, maybe?" "Blood," Wolfe said softly. "Old, dried." Lyra's hand went to her mouth. "You mean?" "I mean," Wolfe said, "that someone wished to remind Mrs. Harrow of something buried in memory, not soil. This, Mr. Goodwin, converts our nuisance into a crime." The room felt smaller. Rain rattled the windows as if the city were eavesdropping. Wolfe leaned back, hands interlaced on his stomach. "Miss Norring, your uncle's papers. Did he ever write about a favor? Perhaps one involving those present in the photograph?" "Yes," she whispered. "He mentioned something once, an arrangement he regretted. He called it his spice trade, jokingly. He said he'd mixed the wrong flavors." Wolfe's eyes half closed, triumphant and grim at once. "Cumin, then, is not arbitrary. It is emblematic. Your uncle used it as code for the affair that entangled them all. Someone has revived it to manage the aftermath." "Meaning?" I said. "Meaning one of our guests today," he said, "has resurrected an old conspiracy and now scrambles to bury its scent." The clock struck 3:15. Wolfe opened his eyes fully, sharp as razors under calm lids. "Mr. Goodwin, see that the office is prepared, the chairs in a semicircle, the photograph on the table, and the tin before me. We will dine afterward. For now, I intend to watch deceit reveal itself, patiently, under my roof." That's the trouble with working for Wolfe. You never know whether the game is about to end or finally begin. By the time the clock in the hall nudged 4, the brownstone had been rearranged into what Wolfe calls an arena of reason. The office smelled faintly of orchids and tension. The red leather chairs were set in their arc, facing Wolfe's desk, each one an invitation and a warning. Fritz had drawn the curtains against the drizzle, and Saul was upstairs keeping a discreet watch at the window in case the Bentley without plates decided to pay another visit. Lyra sat nearest Wolfe's desk, pale but composed. She had changed into a darker dress, which made her look both older and more brittle. Wolfe didn't comment. He was saving his words for the paying audience. He had the tin box in front of him, closed, its silvered lid reflecting the lamplight. The photograph lay beside it, as though the two had been born of the same secret. At 4:05, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Victor Holden first, precisely on time, hat in hand, expression neutral as a court ledger. Behind him came Bennett Crane, his navy suit still crisp, his smile even crisper. Mrs. Harrow arrived last, 5 minutes late, veiled and carrying a small clutch bag that looked heavy enough to be interesting. I took their coats and pretenses in equal measure and ushered them into Wolfe's office. He greeted them with his usual economy. "Be seated." They obeyed, though none too gracefully. Wolfe's eyes moved from one to the next like a spotlight with a mind of its own. "You have been summoned," he began, "because an offense has been committed, not against law, though that may follow, but against the integrity of my house. I do not invite trespass, literal or moral." That opening line had the desired effect. Crane smirked but looked uneasy. Halden's fingers found his cuff-link. Mrs. Harrow adjusted her veil and said nothing. Lyra kept her eyes on Wolfe as though his calm might hold her up. He gestured to the photograph. Miss Norring's uncle, now deceased, retained personal memoranda on his associates, notes of a private and sometimes political nature. His study was recently entered, not once, but twice. The intruder left this photograph and later removed a small jar of cumin. Yesterday, Mrs. Harrow discovered this. He indicated the tin box. Mrs. Harrow's breath caught, a tiny sound. Wolfe didn't look at her. "I suggest you all take a long, contemplative look. The scent, you may notice, is distinctive." No one volunteered to sniff. I could have told them it was unnecessary. The odor of cumin was already staking out the air, sharp and earthy, the way guilt might smell if it had roots. Halden cleared his throat. "This is theatrical, Mr. Wolfe. If you have questions, ask them. Otherwise, I fail to see the point." "The point," Wolfe said softly, "is to determine which of you feared the survival of your late associate's records enough to violate Miss Norring's property. The cumin, you see, was not random. It symbolized something her uncle called his spice trade, a confidential arrangement involving political favors and discreet financial transfers among the four of you. That landed like a dropped stone." Mrs. Harrow's gloved hands twisted together. Crane's eyes narrowed. Halden sat too still. "You have no proof of this," Crane said, his voice tight. "I have inference," Wolfe replied, "which, when correct, is superior to proof. The cumin jar disappeared because it was a signal, a reminder of complicity. Mrs. Harrow received this tin to warn her that silence was no longer optional. "I told you," she blurted. "I didn't know who put it in my pocket." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "but you suspected someone in this room." Her eyes went to Halden, quick and trembling. He stiffened. "Ridiculous. She's letting paranoia feed on coincidence." I said, "Funny coincidence, though. You were the only one with regular access to the house after the uncle's death." "That was my duty as executor," he snapped. "Duty doesn't usually smell like cumin," I said. Wolfe raised a hand. "Enough. Mr. Halden, the intrusion was executed with knowledge of the locks and their duplicates. Miss Norring kept one key. Her uncle's was in your custody after his death. No sign of forced entry. Explain." Halden's composure cracked just enough for a bead of sweat to appear at his temple. "Perhaps the locksmith who changed them years ago kept a copy. You're suggesting absurdities." Wolfe's voice dropped. "Absurdity is the refuge of the guilty. The man who sat outside Miss Norring's home yesterday, paid in cash by a client in a velvet-collared overcoat, was acting on whose behalf?" Crane straightened. "Not mine." Wolfe's gaze didn't shift. "You wear such a coat, Mr. Crane. Imported, dark velvet, made in London. Your tailor's advertisements do not lie." Crane flushed. "That proves nothing. Anyone could have—" "Precisely," Wolfe said. "Anyone who feared exposure of those political payments. Your firm's contract with Mrs. Harrow's fund was terminated the week after the photograph was taken, when her late friend expressed dissatisfaction with the trade. A day later, you transferred funds to a shell company, registered under Mr. Halden's cousin's name. You gentlemen were partners in convenience, if not in crime." Halden rose. "This is outrageous. You can't—" "Sit down," Wolfe commanded. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it was enough to fold Halden back into his chair like wet paper. Outrage is a poor disguise for terror. The question is not if you conspired, but who among you now seeks to dominate the remainder by intimidation. Mrs. Harrow's warning call to Mr. Goodwin last night demonstrates she was the chosen target. She looked up, startled. Then who sent it? That, madam, is the residue of cunning. Wolfe's eyes half closed. One of you knew I would be engaged, that the photograph would compel my involvement. The cumin was not a mark of threat, but a test, to see who would come to me first, and how swiftly I would trace the pattern. Crane stood abruptly. I don't have to listen to this melodrama. I moved before Wolfe had to say it. You do now. I stayed near the door without blocking. Just enough suggestion of permanence. Wolfe regarded Crane as if he was something under glass. You will listen, Mr. Crane, because you arranged the test. You paid the watcher. You planted the photograph, expecting Miss Norring's alarm to draw scrutiny away from you. When Mrs. Harrow found the tin, you ensured she'd panic and call us. Your miscalculation was in assuming I would not recognize the scent for what it was. A metaphor. You resurrected the symbol of the spice trade to remind them all of their shared sin, believing fear would secure their silence. Instead, it has exposed you. Crane's face hardened, but he didn't speak. He looked at Halden, whose expression was already collapsing into weary understanding. Mrs. Harrow's gloves trembled against each other like moths. Wolfe leaned back, closing his eyes as if sealing the verdict. Mr. Goodwin, call Inspector Kramer. He will find the original memoranda in Mr. Crane's office safe behind the false back of the lower drawer. There is no need to hurry. Our guest is unlikely to flee. He has, after all, nowhere left to go. And for a long, taut minute, the only sound in the room was the rain outside, washing what was left of their secrets down the city's throat. Crane didn't bolt, which was smart, but he looked like a man calculating distances anyway. His jaw twitched, his eyes moving from Wolfe to the door, to me, and back again. I'd seen that look before. From men who had just discovered that lying required a better memory than they had brought along. Halden slumped in his chair, hands folded like a bad prayer. Mrs. Harrow's veil had slipped to her lap, and she wasn't bothering to fix it. The air felt thick enough to bottle. Wolfe let it stretch. He doesn't rush silence. He breeds it until someone suffocates. It was Crane who broke first. You can't possibly know what was in that safe, he said. You're bluffing. Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction. I rarely bluff, Mr. Crane. Bluffing presumes uncertainty, and I find that a poor companion. You have nothing but conjecture, Crane snapped. Conjecture, Wolfe said, is an insult to reasoning. I have sequence, motive, opportunity, and your own behavior as confirmation. You are sweating, despite the temperature, and your right hand trembles when I mention the memoranda. That hand, incidentally, also carries a faint discoloration near the nail bed, consistent with handling oxidized iron powder. The same substance in the tin. You tried to recreate the spice mixture your late associate used to scent his correspondence, to authenticate the false warning to Mrs. Harrow, a foolish indulgence in detail. Crane stared at his hand, then shoved it into his pocket like that would erase chemistry. Halden spoke up suddenly, voice cracking. Bennett, for God's sake, what did you do? Crane turned on him, eyes sharp. Don't start sanctimonious now. You were in it as deep as I was. He kept record. Your signatures, your promises. You think I wanted this mess? Gentlemen, Wolfe interrupted, his tone heavy with disdain. If you intend to disintegrate, please have the decency to do so coherently. Mrs. Harrow's voice was a whisper. Records? Of what? Crane laughed, the kind that sounds too close to breaking. Your donations, Lila. The transfers to the committee accounts, the favors for legislation. You think your name was kept clean. We all bought our safety in installments, and your friend kept receipts. Wolfe sighed, the sound of a man lamenting the incompetence of humanity. Your uncle, Miss Norring, believed in leverage, not wealth, a less vulgar currency, but equally corruptible. He advised, collected secrets, and recorded them, not out of malice, but discipline. When he died, those records were worth more than his estate. Mr. Crane sought to retrieve or destroy them. Mr. Holden, no doubt, assisted by omission. Holden rose half out of his chair. You can't prove any of this. The police, Wolfe said, will find corroboration in the correspondence and financial trails. I don't require their verification to know what is true. He paused, letting his gaze settle on each of them. Mr. Crane, you intended to use those memoranda not merely to erase them, but to control those implicated. You attempted to resurrect your influence through blackmail, disguising it as a shared rescue operation. The cumin, your signal of control, became instead the thread that drew you here. Crane's shoulders slumped as if he'd been deflated by logic. He looked at Lyra then, and something in his face softened. I didn't want to hurt you, he said. You weren't supposed to be involved. If you'd ignored the photo, none of this... She stood abruptly. If I'd ignored it, you would have bled the rest of them dry. My uncle might have been manipulative, but you're a scavenger. Wolfe tapped his bell once. Fritz appeared in the doorway, silent, waiting. Fritz, Wolfe said, ask Mr. Panzer to come in. Mr. Crane will remain seated until Inspector Kramer arrives. Mrs. Harrow let out a slow, shaky breath, her composure fraying at the edges. Then it's over, she said. Over, Wolfe repeated. Perhaps for you, madam, but not for the principal. Corruption ends rarely. It merely migrates. Your concern, I suggest, should be reflection, not relief. Kramer arrived 20 minutes later with Sergeant Stebbins in tow. He looked like a man summoned from a stake halfway through its prime. All right, Wolfe, he growled. You said I'd want to hear this in person, so talk. What's the setup this time? I gave him the short version while Wolfe sat motionless, eyes half closed, the picture of patience. Crane said nothing until Kramer asked directly whether he denied any of it. Then he gave a bitter smile. You'll find the papers where Wolfe said they are. That's proof enough. Kramer shot me a look that said he both hated and respected the accuracy. You're a pain, Goodwin, he muttered. And your boss is a civic blessing, Wolfe supplied without opening his eyes. Stebbins took Crane by the elbow, but the man didn't fight. Holden sank lower in his chair, mumbling something about lawyers. Mrs. Harrow kept staring at the tin box as though it might start whispering. When they were led out, Lyra didn't move until the front door shut behind them. Then she turned to Wolfe. So that's it. You've solved it. He looked at her, considering. Solved, yes. Concluded, not yet. Your uncle's notes, if as extensive as I surmise, remain potent. You will destroy them, Miss Norring. Do not read them. She hesitated. But they might clear his name. They might also corrupt yours, Wolfe said. Knowledge is a heavier inheritance than money. Carry less of it. She nodded slowly, tears threatening but disciplined back. I'll do as you say. When she'd gone, Wolfe exhaled and closed his eyes fully. Archie, have Fritz send up the saffron broth. My patience has been tested beyond reason. I sat back, watching the last of the daylight turn the curtains amber. You know, for a man who claims to detest trouble, you collect it like orchids. He opened one eye. Trouble, he said, is the natural condition of thought among the obstinate. Humanity provides more than enough fertilizer. That was Wolfe's version of poetry, and as close to contentment as he gets. I didn't argue. I just poured myself a drink and listened to the rain start again, thinking how even when the case was closed, it left a scent. Something sharp, earthy, and impossible to forget. Wolfe hates interruptions during digestion, which in his book begins when Fritz announces the soup and ends sometime around the hour when ordinary men are halfway through their second bourbon. So when the doorbell rang at 9:30, Fritz hesitated long enough for Wolfe to sigh. That sigh meant I was the one who'd have to deal with it. It was Saul. His hat was dripping and his face was the kind that announces news you won't like. "Sorry, Archie, but you'd rather I came now." Wolfe's voice floated from the dining room. "Enter, Mr. Panzer. Bad news is rarely improved by delay." We all moved back into the office, the dishes cleared, the beer replaced by a fresh bottle. Saul stood in the doorway, hands in his coat pockets. "Crane's dead," he said. Wolfe froze. Not in shock, but in adjustment. His head tilted slightly, like a man correcting an internal equation. "Explain." "Police took him from here to the station, routine questioning before lockup. 20 minutes after Kramer left, the car was found stopped at a red light on Madison, engine running, both officers unconscious. Crane gone. They found him an hour later in an alley off 47th, broken neck. No witnesses. Lyra had been upstairs but came down halfway through Saul's report, robe wrapped tight. "He's dead," she said. "Then it's over." "No," Wolfe said quietly. "It never ends so tidily. Mr. Panzer, were the officers drugged?" Saul nodded. "Chloroform, likely, but it was precise. Someone professional." "Not Mr. Crane's own handiwork, then," Wolfe said. "He was many things, but not deft." Saul shifted. "Kramer's furious. He thinks maybe Halden arranged it to keep Crane quiet." "That would be the simple hypothesis," Wolfe murmured. "And the wrong one. Simple motives rarely survive examination." He looked at Saul. "Continue your inquiries. I wish to know whether Mr. Crane left any messages, calls, or visitors in the hours before his arrest. Pay particular attention to Mrs. Harrow." Lyra stared at him. "You think she—" "I think she possesses the means and the desperation," Wolfe said. "Mr. Crane's death benefits her most immediately. His silence secures hers. That arithmetic is difficult to ignore." She sank into the chair nearest the Globe bar, but she seemed terrified. "She gave you that tin." Wolfe nodded. Terror and cunning are rarely strangers. A frightened mind can act with remarkable precision if self-preservation demands it. I asked, "You think she killed him herself?" "Unlikely. But she could have arranged it through intermediaries. Money is a flexible servant." "Or," I said, "Crane had other enemies who decided to get in line early." "Possible," Wolfe conceded, "but premature. The man's death alters the balance. The memoranda remain the true quarry." He turned to Lyra. "Did you follow my instruction?" She hesitated, which is never a good opening answer for Wolfe. "I haven't destroyed them yet. I wanted to understand them first." Wolfe's eyes closed for a second, then opened. "Human folly is inexhaustible. You have read them?" "Only some. They're not what you think. They're not just notes about favors or payments. They're letters, half-written drafts, observations. My uncle was afraid of something or someone. There's a name that keeps appearing, the benefactor. No first name, no description." Wolfe leaned forward slightly, which for him was the equivalent of leaping to his feet. "The benefactor," he repeated. "In what context?" "As if my uncle worked for him, or owed him. There are phrases. Deliverable owed, fulfillment pending, debts renewed. It sounds like he was part of something larger." "That," Wolfe said slowly, "is an underestimation. Mr. Crane, Mr. Halden, and Mrs. Harrow were likely subordinate pieces in a design. The death of Mr. Crane is a cleanup, someone's attempt to erase links." I said, "So now we're looking for the guy who cleans the cleaners." "Crude, but apt," Wolfe murmured. "Miss Noring, I will require those documents at once." She shook her head. "No, I can't. Not yet. They're not here. I straightened. Where exactly are they not here? At my uncle's house. I hid them in the study before coming tonight. I thought it was safer there than carrying them around. I looked at Wolfe. He shut his eyes, pinched the bridge of his nose, and said something in a tone that could have curdled Fritz's custard. Safer, he muttered, is a relative term, and you have chosen the wrong relative. The phone rang before he could elaborate. I answered. It was Kramer, and he sounded like a man chewing a cigar out of spite. Goodwin, tell that oversized philosopher I'm through playing nursemaid. Crane's dead, yes, but it wasn't Holden. We found his car parked outside his apartment building, keys in the ignition, engine cold. He's missing. His housekeeper says he got a call around 8, left in a hurry, didn't say where. That's your second disappearance in one day, and I don't like coincidences. I'll pass it along, I said. When I hung up, Wolfe was already watching me. Inspector Kramer, I said, reports that Holden's gone missing. Wolfe nodded once, the barest tilt of acknowledgement. As I anticipated. When one piece is removed, the next falls. Mr. Panzer, you will accompany Mr. Goodwin to Miss Norring's house. Retrieve the papers. If they remain, bring them. If not, learn who has taken them. Lyra stood. I'm coming too. Wolfe's tone could have frozen Mercury. You will not. The house is now the center of peril. You will stay here, where I may at least preserve your idiocy from further expression. She looked ready to argue, but Saul put a hand on her shoulder. He's right, Miss Norring. Let us handle it. We left a few minutes later. The rain had turned to fog that made the street lamps look like they'd given up hope. As Saul drove, I thought about the chain Wolfe had built. The photo, the cumin, the records, the dead man, and now a missing one. The spice jar had started it, and everything since had been one long whiff of corruption dressed up as coincidence. When we reached 91st, the house loomed out of the mist like it had been waiting for us. The windows were dark, but a faint line of light leaked under the door. Saul cut the engine. Someone's home, he said. We climbed the steps quietly. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled of damp paper and, worse, cumin. The study door stood half open. I pushed it, and the lamp inside swayed slightly, casting long, nervous shadows across the desk. On the rug lay a man, face down, hands curled. Holden. Saul crouched beside him, checked his neck, and shook his head. Still warm. I looked at the desk. The drawer where Lyra said she'd hidden the papers was open and empty. Well, said, Wolfe wanted facts. I'd say we've just found 2, one dead and one missing. Saul rose, eyes sharp. And the third, he said. Someone else is still here. That was when the floorboard creaked upstairs. Saul moved first, silent as habit, drawing the small flashlight he kept in his coat. The creak had come from above, the narrow landing that ran past the guest room. I motioned for him to circle toward the stairs while I took the slower route along the hall. The only sound was the faint hum of the street outside and the tick of a clock that didn't care who lived or died beneath it. When we reached the top, the smell hit. Cumin again, heavier now, laced with something metallic. Saul's light swung across the floorboards, stopping on a smear near the doorway of the small parlor. It wasn't much, just a streak of dark residue, but the scent told us enough. Someone had been working fast. I pushed the door open with my foot. The window was ajar by a few inches, curtain fluttering. Papers littered the carpet like fallen leaves, none of them Lyra's uncle's notes. Blank pages scattered deliberately. A diversion. Whoever had been there knew what to leave behind to waste our time. Saul checked the window frame. Dust disturbed. Went out this way, he said. Down to the yard. We moved quick but careful, down the stairs, past Holden's body. I didn't stop to look at him again. The dead can wait, and the living can't. Out the back door, the yard sloped toward the alley. The fog thickened there, and from somewhere close came the echo of footsteps. Saul took off at a pace that made me regret every sandwich I'd eaten that week. We turned the corner just in time to catch a shadow slipping through the mist toward a waiting car, a black sedan, lights off. The door opened, slammed, engine turned over, and it rolled away before either of us could make the plate. Saul swore under his breath. Whoever it was, he said, they knew exactly where those papers were. No rummaging, no hesitation. Which means they'd seen them before, I said, or been told where to look. We stood there a minute, watching the fog eat the taillights, then went back inside. Saul called Kramer from the hall phone while I checked the desk again. Nothing. Whoever had taken the memoranda had cleaned up well, even locking the drawer behind them. Wolfe would appreciate the efficiency and despise the timing. Kramer arrived half an hour later with Stebbins and a pair of uniforms who looked too young to be in a house where the wallpaper had seen more crimes than they had birthdays. He took one look at Holden and muttered something unprintable, then turned on me. "Don't tell me Wolfe sent you here to find another corpse." "Sorry, Inspector." "We don't take requests," I said. "We came for the papers Miss Noring left here. Someone else beat us to them." Kramer's face turned a deeper shade of crimson. "And you didn't see who?" "Only a car leaving the alley. Black sedan, no plates again." He kicked at the rug, disgusted. "Same setup as Crane. Fast, quiet, efficient. You know what this smells like." "Not cumin. Organization. Someone with reach." "Maybe your friend the benefactor," I said. That earned me a stare. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Name from the uncle's notes. Wolfe thinks he was the top of the food chain." Kramer grunted. "Then your Wolfe just promoted himself into another murder investigation. I'll send a team to check the prints and call it in. But you tell him this. He's done guessing from the armchair. I want facts." I promised to pass it along and got Saul out before Kramer's temper started asking for victims. We drove back through a city wrapped in fog and suspicion. When we reached the brownstone, Wolfe was exactly where we'd left him, of course. Chair, beer, patience. He didn't look up when I spoke. "Holden's dead. Neck broken, papers gone. Whoever did it left through the upstairs window, took the alley. Black sedan again, no plates." He let out a slow, almost inaudible breath. So the hand continues to erase its traces. Predictable. "Mr. Panzer, your opinion?" Saul leaned against the doorframe. "Professional, all the way. Smooth extraction, no wasted motion, and someone tipped them where to look. Maybe Holden himself before he went cold. Maybe the lady." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Mrs. Harrow, yes. Her call last night. Timed to create confusion. She was not warning us. She was warning them. Mr. Crane's death silenced one voice, Mr. Holden's another. The orchestration is too precise for fear alone. We are left with a conductor." "The benefactor," I said, says, indeed." He leaned forward, thick fingers tapping the edge of the desk. "Miss Noring, kindly fetch the remaining papers you read. You said you examined only a few." She came in from the adjoining room holding a small envelope. These were tucked in a separate folder. I thought they were drafts. Wolfe took them, unfolded one sheet, read silently. His brows knit once, then smoothed. "Ah, here is the proof of continuity. This correspondence mentions a meeting last winter at the Hartwell Club. The same evening depicted in the photograph." "That was the night the deal fell apart," I said. "Or was sealed under new management," Wolfe replied. "The benefactor attended in disguise. These letters imply he financed the spice trade, converting influence into revenue through a network of proxies. Your uncle was his intermediary, until conscience or calculation turned him hesitant. That hesitation earned him a successor, Mr. Crane, and ultimately his death. Lyra's voice trembled. Then the benefactor is still out there? Yes, Wolfe said, and growing nervous. The remaining papers he stole tonight contain the only written trace of his identity. He will assume, erroneously, that I can reconstruct it from inference alone. I said, and can you? He smiled faintly. Naturally. Miss Norring's uncle referred to him with an epithet B, and a note about saffron stocks, shipments routed through a charitable fund, Mrs. Harrow's fund to be precise. But her own finances would not support such transactions. Only a backer with industrial means could. I blinked. Industrial, like manufacturing. Precisely, Wolfe said. And who in this circle has the resources, the contacts, and the taste for subtle control? The answer, Mr. Goodwin, was visible from the first. The benefactor is not an unseen phantom. It is the organization behind Bennett Crane's consultancy. He was never its head, merely its operator. The head remains unnamed, but he has now declared war by theft. He leaned back, eyes half closed, the faintest edge of satisfaction in his voice. Tomorrow I shall draw him out. If he wishes to protect what he believes he has concealed, he will come to silence me, and in so doing, he will identify himself. Lyra gasped. You mean bait him? Wolfe opened his eyes again, calm and heavy. My dear Miss Norring, I do not bait men. I simply let them assume I am worth catching. The room fell silent. Outside, a siren moaned somewhere far away, swallowed by the fog. I watched Wolfe reach for his beer, serene as if discussing a new orchid hybrid instead of a killer with a fondness for cumin and corpses. He drank, set the glass down, and said, Mr. Goodwin, lock the doors. We dine at 8 tomorrow. By then, the benefactor will have decided whether to face me or flee. Morning arrived grudgingly, grey and reluctant, like a guest who'd stayed too long. Wolfe's kitchen smelled of coffee and Fritz's patience. The orchids were upstairs bathing in their scheduled humidity, and Wolfe was in the office, freshly fortified by breakfast and ready for the day's inevitable stupidity. I joined him with the newspaper, which had decided to make us front-page material again. Detective's client linked to second death. Wolfe read the headline once, grunted, and folded the paper precisely in half. Publicity, he said, is the sewer of intellect. Kramer's probably whistling while he reads it, I said. He'll drop by later just to enjoy himself. He will come because he must, Wolfe corrected. Our arrangement with him remains adversarial, but necessary. Lyra entered then, pale but more composed. She had traded last night's fright for a kind of brittle determination. There was a call, she said. For you, Mr. Wolfe. A man's voice. He said, tell Mr. Wolfe that the trade is finished. Then he hung up. Wolfe's head tilted. Describe the voice. Calm, older, I think. Refined, but deliberate, as if he were testing how the words would sound before he spoke them. Excellent, Wolfe murmured. The benefactor announces his victory, which means, of course, he has not yet secured it. I said, you think he's calling the game before it's played? He is asserting control, Wolfe replied. But he errs in presuming I'm an audience to intimidation. The call confirms proximity. He would not risk contact unless he believed himself insulated. Therefore, he is in New York, and close. The doorbell rang just then, proving Wolfe's brand of logic was either genius or witchcraft. Fritz answered, returned with a card on a tray. Wolfe took it, examined the engraving. His eyebrows made the faintest arch. Mr. Nathaniel Grieve, he read aloud. President, Hartwell Charitable Industries. Lyra's hand went to her throat. Hartwell, that's Mrs. Harrow's fund's parent company. Precisely, Wolfe said. Show him in. Grieve entered like a man used to being announced, tall and polished, with a face that seemed to have forgotten how to smile naturally. His suit was exact, his shoes reflected the ceiling, and his voice carried a practiced courtesy that could have been taught in diplomacy school. "Mr. Wolfe," he began, "I apologize for intruding without appointment, but after the unfortunate events of yesterday, I thought clarity would serve us both." Wolfe didn't rise. "Clarity," he said, "is a noble pursuit, provided it doesn't arrive with a leash." Greaves' eyes flicked toward Lyra. "Miss Noring, I presume. My condolences for your loss. Your uncle was a valued advisor to our foundation. His insight will be missed." "I imagine his notes will be too," Wolfe said. Greaves' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, you've heard about the theft. The police informed me. A tragedy, really. Confidential documents in the wrong hands can do so much harm." "To the wrong people," Wolfe said mildly. "Exactly." Greaves folded his hands, resting them on his knee. "Which is why I came, to propose a resolution. I represent several interests once aligned with your late client. Those interests wish only for discretion. If the papers, what remains of them, were to be returned to my custody, I assure you Miss Noring would receive full compensation for their sentimental value. We would consider the matter closed." "You offer money," Wolfe said. "How prosaic." "I offer peace," Greaves corrected. "Surely you understand the benefit of ending this quietly. You're a man of reputation, Mr. Wolfe. Surely you'd rather not see it mired in political dust." Wolfe looked at him for a long, silent moment. Then, "You're the benefactor." Greaves didn't blink. "That is a colorful word, but I'll accept it." "Then you've saved us a great deal of trouble," Wolfe said. "You may now explain why you killed your subordinates." Greaves' expression didn't change, but the air in the room did. "You're mistaken." "No," Wolfe said. "You are. You mistook your subordinates for servants. Crane overreached. You silenced him. Halden attempted to flee. You silenced him. You left Cumin behind, that tedious signal of continuity, to misdirect and mystify. But the trail was too coherent for your comfort, so you sought to end it at the source, by retrieving the memoranda, and now, by disarming me." Greaves leaned back. "You're entertaining, Mr. Wolfe. And wrong. Those men died because they were careless. I do not handle carelessness kindly. Nor loyalty, it seems." Wolfe poured himself beer with the composure of a man discussing recipes. "Your call this morning was premature, Mr. Greaves. The trade is not finished until I say so." Greaves stood. "You overestimate your reach." "And you," Wolfe said, "underestimate mine. The documents you recovered last night were copies. Facsimiles prepared by Miss Noring's uncle for distribution should anything happen to him. The originals, complete, annotated, and entirely damning, are secured elsewhere." It was a lie so elegant I almost applauded it. Greaves froze for one perfect second. Then he smiled again, thinner now. "You bluff well. But if what you say were true, we'd have heard of them already." "You're hearing of them now," Wolfe said. "The copies will be delivered to Inspector Kramer this afternoon, unless I instruct otherwise. If you wish to negotiate, you may do so from the correct end of the law." Greaves' civility cracked just slightly. "Be careful, Mr. Wolfe. There are limits even to your immunity." "I am careful," Wolfe said. "That's why I'm alive, and your associates are not." For a heartbeat, the two men looked at each other without sound. Then Greaves inclined his head. "Very well. You've made your point. I'll take my leave." He turned, nodded politely to Lyra, and walked out. Fritz closed the door behind him. Lyra exhaled shakily. "You didn't tell me there were no copies." "There weren't," I said. "Until now." Wolfe reached for his beer again. "Mr. Greaves is an organism accustomed to control. Deny it, and he will react predictably. By sundown, he will attempt to retrieve the non-existent originals or neutralize the one man who claims to have them. Both paths lead back here. Mr. Goodwin, ensure the house is sealed. Mr. Panzer will station himself outside. By tomorrow, we shall have our confirmation." Lyra stared at him. "You're using yourself as bait again." "Not bait," Wolfe corrected, sipping his beer. "A mirror. The guilty cannot resist admiring their reflection." I didn't say it aloud, but I knew the look in Wolfe's eyes, the patient calm of a man setting a trap so precise it wouldn't need to close twice. And somewhere out there, Nathaniel Grieve was already deciding whether Nero Wolfe was bluffing or simply waiting. The night pressed close around their ears, brownstone like a patient conspirator. Fritz had long since retired, and Saul Panzer stood in the vestibule's shadow, quiet and invisible as a locked drawer. Wolfe had settled in his chair, eyes closed, fingers steepled, as if he were conducting a symphony only he could hear. I was at my desk pretending to read a racing column, though what I was really doing was watching the clock crawl toward midnight and waiting for something to happen. It did. At 11:30, a car eased up to the curb outside. Black, of course. Its lights died as the engine whispered into silence. Saul didn't move from his post, but I saw the faint flicker of motion through the curtains. Someone stepping out, a man in an overcoat with a velvet collar. Nathaniel Grieve had come to see whether the game he'd started still had pieces left on the board. He didn't ring. He knocked, soft and deliberate, the kind of knock that assumes admission. I opened the door halfway. "Mr. Wolfe isn't taking visitors at this hour." Grieve's eyes were steady. "You'll make an exception." I shrugged. "He doesn't make exceptions. He makes deductions." Behind me, Wolfe's voice, calm as a drawn blade. "Let him in, Archie." Grieve entered, removing his gloves as though discarding ceremony. His composure had cooled into something sharper. "You're either brave or foolish, Mr. Wolfe. You realize what you've done. You've invited the wrong kind of attention." "Attention," Wolfe said, "is my livelihood. You have come, as I calculated, to recover what you believe I hold." "I came," Grieve said, "to correct an error. Those papers belong to me." "Correction," Wolfe replied. "They belong to truth, and truth has the bad habit of preferring exposure." Grieve smiled faintly. "You've had your sport. Name your price." "Everything has one." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "but I deal in a different currency. I require honesty." Grieve's eyes narrowed. "You'll find it expensive." "I can afford it." Wolfe gestured toward the photograph on his desk, the dinner at the Hartwell Club. "You recall that evening, of course. Your hand guided all of them, Crane, Holden, Harrow, and the unfortunate advisor whose conscience cost him his life. The cumin on the table, a private joke about your spice trade. Clever, but hubris rarely stays private for long. Your subordinates believed themselves partners. You knew better. When your network began to crumble, you removed its weak links." Grieve laughed softly. "You have imagination, I'll grant you that, but no proof." "On the contrary," Wolfe said, "I have abundance of it. You see, when you rifled Miss Noring's house last night, you retrieved the decoy papers I prepared in anticipation. They contain precisely enough truth to tempt your curiosity, and precisely enough falsity to mark you." Grieve's brow creased. "Mark me?" Each page was dusted with cinnabar, Wolfe said, voice smooth as cream. "A harmless red pigment, invisible in low light. It adheres to fabric with enthusiasm. When you entered your car, you left traces on the seat, the latch, and the cashmere cuff of your overcoat. The police, having found Mr. Holden's body, also found similar residue on the window frame through which you fled. A perfect match, chemically speaking." Grieve's control cracked for the first time. "You're bluffing again." "You may verify it," Wolfe said. "Inspector Kramer has been notified. He and Mr. Panzer will be here presently. I imagine they will find your overcoat instructive." Grieve turned toward the door. Saul was already there, silent and solid, a revolver resting lightly at his side. Grieve stopped. "You're finished," Wolfe said. "But I am not unmerciful. You may preserve a fragment of dignity by acknowledging what you've done." Grieve straightened, the mask sliding back into place. "You've built a theory on pigment and paranoia. It won't hold." "Perhaps not in court," Wolfe said, "but it will suffice for conscience. You have none, I have too much. Between us, justice may find equilibrium." Kramer arrived 10 minutes later with Stebbins in tow. He took one look at Grieve and barked, "Well, I'll be, if it isn't the philanthropist of the year. You can save the speech. We've already got enough to keep you talking downtown till sunrise." As they led Grieve out, he turned once, eyes cold. "You think this ends with me? There are others." "There always are," Wolfe said. "But only one who mattered tonight." When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled, the tension leaking from him in degrees. Pfui, men who disguise greed as philanthropy should at least have the courtesy to smell better. Lyra stepped from the hall, having heard enough to understand. "So it's done?" "Yes," Wolfe said, "though satisfaction is a vulgar word. Your uncle's name will suffer public dissection, but the truth will endure. That is the best redemption available to the dead." She looked down. "And the papers?" "They will be destroyed," Wolfe said. "They have served their purpose. Knowledge, when it ceases to enlighten, corrodes." She nodded. Tears caught somewhere between sorrow and release. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. I think my uncle would have liked you." "I hope not," Wolfe said dryly. "I prefer my admirers alive and silent." After she'd gone, the brownstone felt like itself again, quiet, heavy, unviolated. Fritz would have the kitchen humming by morning, and the orchids upstairs would continue their patient, apolitical bloom. I poured Wolfe a beer, poured myself a drink, and said, "Well, the case you hated turned out all right." He opened one eye. "You hated it, Mr. Goodwin. I merely endured it. Yet even endurance has its uses." "Such as?" He looked at the amber glass in his hand. "To remind us that human appetites, be they for power, spice, or redemption, must all be consumed in moderation." He drank, set the glass down, and closed his eyes. I let the quiet settle around us. Outside, the city kept moving, hungry, deceitful, alive. Inside, Nero Wolfe had returned to his fortress of logic, and I to mine of curiosity. And if either of us learned anything from the case, it was that even the sharpest minds can't always tell where truth ends and appetite begins. Dinner would be served on time tomorrow. I'm